Frustrated by how tiny he was, I looked for something bigger. He exploded in anger and walked away. It's hard to admit when your choices leave a real problem you can't erase, but here I am sharing the mess I created. It's not easy to talk about, but maybe by doing so, I can finally confront what I've done. Looking back, I never imagined I'd end up in this position trapped by my own mistakes, carrying the stress of the bad decisions I made I wish I could take back. Hi Reddit. I had what most people would consider a good life. My husband Jake was all that I believed that I needed the first time around when we married. He was kind, he was educated, and he listened in ways that made me feel heard and worthwhile. Our love wasn't picture perfect, but it was rock solid. Or so it was at first. The type of love where even in silence you felt satisfied. We'd spend our time going out, watching a movie, and going shopping together. This really made me think that everything is going as I wanted it to be. But somewhere along the way, things started to change that quick. As the years passed, the excitement was completely gone from the side, and routine settled in. I found myself craving something I couldn't quite not tell. It wasn't that Jake did anything wrong. He was still the same man I married. Maybe that was the problem. He didn't change, but I did. I started noticing the things about him that frustrated me, things I used to overlook. And while I hate admitting this, intimacy became one of those frustrations. It wasn't like I sat there dwelling on it every day. It was just a quiet, random thought in the back of my mind that really started to hit me after some time. I began to wonder if this was how it was supposed to feel. Shouldn't there be more? Was I asking for too much? These questions gradually removed the respect I had for Jake. Rather than telling it to him, I allowed it to go just the way I like, covering my discontent with a smile and acting as if everything was okay. I had this idea that this is a phase that would get over soon. Outside of home, we were the perfect couple. Friends and family would comment on how fortunate I was to have such a husband as Jake, and I would nod in affirmation. Deep inside, however, I knew that it's not as everybody perceives. I began to make excuses for staying away from him. Small things he did, which once used to charm me, started irritating me. And then there were the silences between us. Not the comfortable ones, but the ones that seemed like an unspoken recognition of the distance between us. I didn't realize it then, but those little problems in our marriage were the start of something much larger. Had I been honest with myself, perhaps I might have been able to prevent it before it got out of hand. Instead, I allowed my frustrations to direct me, seeking a solution in all the wrong places. Now that I am sitting here thinking about all that went down, I can understand how my actions destroyed the life we created together. And the worst part is, it wasn't just my marriage that I destroyed, it was my own sense of self. This is where my story begins, the story of how I allowed my own selfishness to dominate me, how I betrayed the one person that really loved me, and how I lost it all because I continued complaining. If only I could turn back time, I would do everything differently, but life doesn't offer you do-overs, and now I have nothing but regret. This is not easy to say, but it's the truth, and it's something I have to live with on a daily basis. When I think about it now, I can see how the silly issues in my marriage started to expand before I realized what was happening. At first, they were small, almost invisible, just some random thoughts that I thought was something very normal, the kind of doubts you tell yourself everyone experiences. But those thoughts, those tiny moments of dissatisfaction, started to linger longer each time, growing into feelings that I couldn't really ignore at that time. The intimacy between Jake and me had always been one of our weaker points, but I used to believe it didn't matter. I told myself there was more to a relationship than that, and I could overlook it because everything else was good. But as time went on, that small frustration began to feel much larger. It wasn't the physical part, it was the isolation that came with it. I needed to be loved, needed to feel like more than just a constant in his life. Jake didn't appear to see how far I had retreated, or perhaps he saw it, but didn't know what to do about it. Either way, I felt so desperate to be there. I didn't express anything to him. I kept my feelings away from him, convincing myself it was better that way. After all, what could I say? How was I supposed to let him know that I wasn't happy without hurting him? So instead, I suppressed my feelings and attempted to concentrate on other aspects of my life, my job, my interests, and eventually, the people in my life. That is where the real problem started. We had recently relocated to a new community a couple of years before things all came tumbling down. At first I was antisocial, but gradually I started mingling with some of the women in the community. Initially I was antisocial, but over time I began to socialize with some of the women in the community. They possessed this vibe that was infectious, and I found myself being attracted to it. It was innocuous in the beginning. I'd have coffee or chat with them for a while at night. I had a great time with these people. Being with them gave me the gesture to do different things. They could make me forget about my frustrations even for a second. But with time, as our friendship became stronger, I could not help but observe how different their lives were compared to mine. They discussed their relationships freely, their one-night stands, and the freedom they experienced. At first, it was shocking to me, but with time, it became fascinating to me. They were not constrained by the same limitations as I was. They lived in the moment, chasing excitement wherever they could find it. I envied that. I was so jealous of how they could say everything so freely, and they had so much time to go out and do whatever they wanted to do. I started spending more time with them, and I used to ask them to plan something fun, often coming home later than usual. Jake didn't seem to mind, or maybe he just didn't notice. I justified it to myself that you only live once. After all, what was the harm in having friends? I deserved to have a life outside of my marriage, didn't I? But deep down, I knew I was walking a dangerous line. The more I distanced myself from Jake, the easier it became to entertain thoughts I shouldn't have been having. It wasn't long before I met someone through these friends. He wasn't in their crew, only a guy who happened to run into me. He was handsome, arrogant, and Jake's complete opposite. I remember how he used to look at me, like I was the most beautiful person in the world. It had been years since I'd last seen that, and I couldn't stop imagining that moment. I didn't, not then anyway, but it was there, tempting me and growing stronger each day. I was so happy that I was being noticed by someone so handsome. It wasn't a big deal for me at that time. A fleeting moment of weakness. Everyone has those, right? It didn't mean anything. But the more I rationalized it, the more I found myself craving that attention again. I didn't seek it out, not intentionally, but I didn't stay away from it either. It was like a drug and some kind of obsession also. I started to crave for it more and more. I always had that excitement on my mind, and I also thought that he knew how to keep my happy with attention. He could literally take me out as most handsome guys do. I was feeling guilty, but some things are not the way you feel. I told myself that Jake wasn't satisfying my own desired needs, that I deserved to feel desired, to feel alive again. It wasn't fair to blame him entirely, but at the time, it felt like the only way to justify what was happening. I was convincing myself that I was so stuck with this boring marriage that I had no choice but to look elsewhere for what I was missing. I wanted that change in my life so desperately. On the top of my mind, I can see how bad those thoughts were. They became the problem for the decisions that followed, the ones that eventually destroyed everything I had with me, but at the time, I didn't see it that way. I saw it as a way to cope, a way to escape the unhappiness I didn't want to talk about. And in doing so, I set myself on a path I would come to regret more than anything. I chose that path because I was too excited, and it made me do more and more. Temptation always comes in any time, and you just want to feel it that badly, starting as something so small you can barely notice it. For me, it came in the form of a hot guy who seemed to have everything I felt was missing in my life. I didn't hope that this would happen, and I didn't set out to look for anything beyond my marriage. But sometimes, life has a way of presenting you with choices you're not ready for, and I made the wrong ones. The reason why I was so obsessed with him at that time was because he knew everything I wanted and I had no way to tell him. Where Jake was predictable and stable, this guy was exciting and unpredictable. He really did make me laugh for the first time in years. It was effortless, as if he had some sort of secret password and knew exactly what to say to leave me feeling like the only woman in the room. And for a person who had spent so long feeling invisible and neglected, that sensation was intoxicating. I didn't want to admit it, but I had craved it for so long. I was surprisingly so happy when I got to be with him, and he was the one who took me on cute dates, which I was always planning with Jake. At first, I convinced myself that there is no point in worrying about things. There was nothing wrong with enjoying a little attention, right? I wasn't doing anything wrong. But as the weeks went by, those casual interactions started to feel less innocent. He'd text me after our group outings, little messages that made me feel as if I am the most beautiful girl in this whole world. I never ignored them. I lied to myself saying they meant nothing, but of course they were the reason behind my smile. When he first complimented me, I started to blush and attempted to brush it off like it wasn't a thing, but it made me feel like it was truly being seen for the first time in a long while, and that feeling was not easy to go around with. With time, he started to compliment me more. He'd comment on things about me that Jake never did, like a new dress, how I wore my hair, even the way I used to smile. It was like he was reading my heart. I knew that I was taking a risk continuing to go out with him, but I couldn't resist. I was walking on a tightrope, attempting to calm myself. I had the thrill of this new attention. I assured myself that I wasn't doing anything bad. It was just my time, a little indulgence from the drabness of my marriage. But every time, the lines between right and wrong blurred as if it didn't exist. The real problem took place one evening as we went out with friends. I caught myself looking around at the crowd, hoping to see his smile and get that feeling of being with him. When he finally showed up, I was like, I'm dreaming, and I knew I'd gone way too far. He wasn't merely a person I liked to talk to. He was that type of guy who I always wanted to see, somebody I even missed when he was not present. That evening, as our group walked home, he asked to take me to my car, which was so impressive in my eyes. It was just such a little thing, but I just thought it was so sweet. But at the time, it felt like so much more. As we walked, the way we started to talk was so deep, and I found myself talking to him like I hadn't talked to Jake in years. It terrified me how easy it was to drop my guard. When I arrived at my car, he kept on looking at me. We didn't do anything, but the tension was there. Driving home that evening, my head was full of feelings. I was guilt-ridden over even after what I have done, yet simultaneously, I couldn't stop myself from reliving each second in my mind, revealing that lovely excitement. I started to tell myself that Jake was the reason why I've become this. If only he had paid attention, if only he had seen me like this man was seeing me, this would not have been occurring. It was simpler to point fingers at him than to deal with the fact that I was deciding to allow this to happen. I didn't pay any attention to the warning signs that were right in front of me. In the coming days, I found myself looking for reasons to return and visit him. I was stuck on my phone, expecting him to text, and when he did, it was a surge of adrenaline. I was alive, something I hadn't been in years, and I didn't want that feeling to end. The guilt remained, but it was fading, drowned out by the excitement of possibility. I knew that I'm not pushing any boundaries, that it is only a love connection. Yet at heart, I was telling myself a lie. I was already so invested, and I did not know how to give up. I could not exactly stop myself. The night it happened is etched in my memory like a scar that I can't keep it away from me. My intentions were not to cross that line. I thought I could keep things under control, keep everything less harmful and innocent. But temptation doesn't work that way. It builds slowly, feeding off your insecurities, your desires, and your weakest moments. And when the opportunity presents itself, it feels almost impossible to stop yourself from it. It was like the typical night we would have. We were out together, laughing, drinking, and having the kind of free-spirited fun that had become my refuge. I recall how easily he dominated the room, how his presence seemed to draw everyone in. And me? I couldn't help but circle in closer. I kept telling myself I was just joking, that it meant nothing, but I knew in my heart that it wasn't true. I knew what I was doing. When the night started moving, he offered to take me home. It wasn't the first offer, but I didn't complain this time. It was different, as if we both knew what was going to happen, but were too afraid to say it. The ride was smooth, filled with silent tension. I was sort of calm then, a combination of fear and exhilaration running through me. I reassured myself I could stop it, that I could step out of the car and stroll into my house as if nothing was wrong. But as we reached my driveway, I didn't budge. I remained there, so caught up in that moment, well aware of what I was going to do to him. It was so easy to let things spiral out of control. One minute we were in the vehicle, and the next I was in pursuit of him. I wish I could say that I paused to consider what I was doing, but the truth is, I didn't. I let myself get swept away by the moment, by how he was looking at me as if I was the only one in the entire world. It was so dizzying, and I did not want it to end. Later, while I lay asleep with my gaze locked on the ceiling, the seriousness of what I had just done began to dawn on me. The rush faded to be replaced with a sick sensation in the base of my stomach. I reassured myself that it was something I would do only once, that it did not mean anything, but I knew better. I had passed the point of no return, and I couldn't turn back. Over the next few days, I attempted to suppress the guilt, but it stuck to me like a shadow. I kept replaying everything in my mind, oscillating between the thrill of it all and the suffocating weight of what I had done. I would find myself grinning at the recollection, only to be smacked with shame a few moments later. It was a tug of war, a struggle between my wants and my conscience. What frightened me the most was how fast it turned into an addiction. The attention, the validation, the way he made me feel, it was like a drug I couldn't stop taking. He had a way of making me forget everything else, of making me feel like I was more than just a wife trapped in a routine. And I needed that feeling. I began searching for ways to make excuses to visit him, learning to slip away from my duties without arousing suspicion. Each secret moment with him was a lifeline, yet it was moving me further away from the girl I once knew. But with each high, there was a low. The guilt was always there in the back of my head, reminding me of what I was playing with. I started catching on to little things that something was off. The way Jake would look at me a millisecond longer than usual, the way he'd ask me what I'd done. I rolled my eyes in the beginning, thinking he had no idea, but as the weeks went by, the paranoia set in. I was overanalyzing every encounter with Jake, thinking whether he felt the space between us. I found myself going out of my way to be excessively polite to him, as if trying to make up for the guilt I had. But no matter what I did, it really started to hit me and made me feel like a terrible person. And yet, I couldn't stop. The thrill of the affair was too intoxicating, too powerful to let go of. It gave me something I didn't realize I was missing: an escape, a way to feel alive again. But at what price? I understood that I was messing around with fire, and it wasn't a question of if it was going to break apart, but when. Looking back, it is clear how rapidly everything spiraled out of control. It started with a single moment of weakness, a decision I thought I could handle. But once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. The rush, the excitement, the attention, it all came with a price I wasn't prepared to pay. And the worst part? I didn't even know how much I was giving away until it was over. It all finished in one evening, and when it did, it wasn't covert. It was a storm that ravaged all that I possessed, destroying everything in its aftermath. Jake discovered my affair, and the consequences were worse than anything I could have ever imagined. I knew that this situation would come. The signs were there. The way he started paying closer attention to my comings and goings, the subtle but pointed questions he asked, and the quiet tension that had started to build between us. I was totally ignoring it, telling myself he didn't know anything. I believed I had covered my tracks well enough, that he was too busy or too trusting to dig deeper, but I underestimated him. The confrontation happened on a night like any other, or so I thought. Jake returned home before his regular time at work. He entered the house with a purposeful attitude which at first went unnoticed but made me feel uneasy. His normal calm demeanor seemed completely absent. He entered the house bearing the mood of an approaching thunderstorm. The way he walked through the house carried determination, and it was then that I experienced my first traces of nervousness during his entire absence. He never asked me anything. He never let me have a chance to explain myself or make an excuse. No, he put it all right out in front of me. He knew it all. The nights I said I was out with friends, the text messages, and the moments I thought I was being so sly, he had it all. He didn't need to tell me how he knew, and quite frankly, it wasn't important. Things were completely different. The expression on his face will stay burned in my memory forever. He showed more hurt and betrayal than anger because his face displayed disgust at the same time. He studied me as though I was someone foreign to him, along with feeling complete estrangement. And at that moment, I could not recognize myself either. I attempted to speak, to explain, to justify what I had done, but nothing came out. What could I even say? That I didn't mean for it to happen? That I still loved him? None of it would have mattered. The truth was out, and nothing I said could change it. Obviously, he would not listen to me at that time. His anger was explosive, raw, and unapologetic. He accused me of tearing down all that we had built together, of destroying the love and trust he had placed in me. And he was right. His words lacked any reservation, and my expectations matched his direct approach. Each statement from him revealed the darkness of my actions like a surgical tool. A desire to defend myself emerged, but I understood I had no right to do so. I picked those choices which led me to this point where I must endure the penalties. As he continued, his way of talking was just so out of control. He explained to me how much he had given up for our marriage, how he had attempted to be the man I required, and how I had wasted it all. He did not sugarcoat anything, and he did not attempt to spare my feelings. It was completely harsh, but I knew it was my fault. When he finally left, there was a silence which was more deafening than his yelling. He looked at me for the last time, eyes wide with rage and sorrow, and spoke words that would haunt me for eternity. He claimed that I ruined everything, not just our wedding, but the segment of him who believed in trust and love. He explained that I had stolen something from him that could never be restored, and so he could not forgive me for it. Then he walked away. He would not let me respond, would not let me plead with him for forgiveness or attempt to make him see. He just turned and walked away, and with him took the last shred of hope I had of mending what I had broken. The crash of the door as he walked out was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. In the subsequent hours, I stayed by myself within the quietness of our household, reliving all that took place. The burden of my actions came on me all in one go, choking me within regret and blame. I pondered over each of the periods I had reasoned my actions to be okay, each of the instances I told myself that it wasn't a major concern, but now with nothing to hide behind, I couldn't help but see the truth. I had ruined the one decent thing in my life, and for what? A moment of thrill? A temporary reprieve from my frustrations? I realized then that there was no undoing what I had done. The damage was irreversible, and the life I had with Jake was gone forever. I considered his expression, the agony in his eyes, and it shattered me. I had taken someone who loved me for who I was and reduced him to a person who could not bear the sight of me. I had hurt him the worst way that anyone could possibly be hurt, and there was no turning back. The phase I was facing just felt unbearable. I wanted to blame someone else, my friends, the man I had cheated with, even Jake, but deep down, I knew this was all on me. I had made the choices that brought us here, and now I had to accept the aftermath. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was the truth. That evening, alone in the ruins of my life, I realized the full magnitude of what I had lost. It wasn't just Jake or our marriage, it was the person I used to be, the person I could have been. And no amount of regret or self-pity could change that. Update. Hi, Reddit. I wanted to share my update with you guys. After Jake walked away, everything felt so empty. The house where I used to sit with my husband became so quiet. It became a daily reminder of what I had lost, and more importantly, what I had destroyed. The life I had built was gone, shattered by my own choices, and here I am now sitting here alone. The following days were perhaps the driest ones I've ever known. The isolation was suffocating, but it was a loneliness that I felt I had earned. I isolated myself from everyone, unable to meet the judgment in their eyes or even the sympathy that could come from those who didn't know all the facts. Shame became my constant companion. Every text I deleted, every call I ignored, only deepened my sense of failure. I couldn't bring myself to explain what happened to anyone. How could I? There was no justification for what I had done. I tried to rebuild, but the weight of my actions followed me everywhere. It seemed impossible to start anew when all I could do was think about how I had destroyed everything that made my life complete. I believed I would be free in escaping my marriage, but what I discovered was a void that couldn't be filled. The thrill, the attention, the validation, it was all temporary. What I was left with was a deep emptiness I hadn't prepared for. Reflecting on everything, I couldn't escape the consequences of my choices. I had messed up a steady, loving relationship for something that never had any real meaning. I allowed my frustrations to consume me, letting temporary desires overshadow the bigger picture. I see now that I wasn't just unfaithful to Jake, I was unfaithful to myself and the values I once held. The hardest part of it all is knowing that Jake didn't deserve this. He wasn't ideal, but he was kind to me in ways I didn't even realize until it was too late. Losing him was not just the demise of our marriage, but the demise of who I used to be. Regret is an understatement. It's a reality I'll carry with me every day. Some mistakes leave scars that never fade, and mine is a wound I'll always bear. Okay, bye guys. I probably won't show up again.